Hello and welcome back to another video. It is May 20th, 2024, and we are starting this foggy morning in Spokane, Washington, along BNSF's Northern Transcontinental Mainline. The focus of this video will be this segment of BNSF track running east from Spokane through Idaho and Montana to the town of Whitefish. The first 70 miles of this route runs as the BNSF Spokane subdivision as far as Sandpoint, Idaho. At Sandpoint, the former Montana rail link branches off of the Northern Transcon, heading southeast for Missoula, Helena, Bozeman, and Billings. We will be sticking with the Northern Transcon, which runs as the Kootenai River subdivision east out of Sandpoint through the Idaho and Montana wilderness to Whitefish, ultimately heading for Minneapolis and Chicago. Between the high traffic density west of Sandpoint and the beautiful scenery of the Kootenai River subdivision, there is plenty to keep one busy out photographing in this part of the BNSF Northern Transcon. It's only about 20 miles of driving east from Spokane to reach the edge of Washington state, marked by a sign along the right-of-way. Through the fog, we heard a train was coming, so we staked it out at the state line for a westbound loaded ethanol train. As 4371 disappeared into Washington, we headed in the opposite direction, entering Idaho. The small town of Ethel was our next stop, as two more trains were squarely in the picture. First to arrive was a high-priority intermodal train heading for either Portland or Seattle. The 6 engines on this intermodal train are a testament to the rugged terrain this train has tackled on its journey from the Midwest. This double-track section of railroad from Sandpoint to Spokane is smooth sailing for this crew, having already tackled the grades of the Montana Rockies. In a few more minutes, an eastbound local freight heading for Sandpoint arrives being pulled by two classic EMD motors. The trailing former Burlington Northern SD60M is squarely in home territory along this former Burlington Northern mainline. With a consist of lumber and woodchip cars for local customers, this train reflects the prevalent forestry industry making up this region's economy. While the Northern Transcon is a vital over-the-road mainline for through freight, plenty of industry still exists along the line, emphasizing its continued local importance. Entering some clear skies and more hilly landscapes, Carrywood is our next stop as a loaded grain train thunders west towards Spokane. Grain trains are incredibly common along the Northern Transcon, originating at various places across the Midwestern United States and heading for the ports of the Pacific Northwest for unloading. Most BNSF grain train consists will utilize locomotives on both ends of the train, not just to improve train handling, but to make turning the entire consist around at terminals easier. The scenery continues to get more beautiful as we close in on Sandpoint, but one more train was in the picture first, so we pulled off in Cocolala for another westbound container train. After a few more miles of driving, we pull into Sandpoint, where BNSF crosses Lake Pend d'Oreille on one of two 4,900-foot-long bridges. Sandpoint is the largest population center along the 148-square-mile lake, which reaches depths of 1,152 feet, making it the fifth deepest lake in the United States. Sandpoint has wonderful waterfront views and beaches, making it a great place to catch some trains traversing the bridges over the lake. BNSF recently completed the construction of a second bridge span across Lake Pend d'Oreille in 2023. This bridge crossing had previously been the only single-track segment on the funnel between Sandpoint and Spokane, creating a choke point for traffic. With the new span open, the line is now double-tracked for its entire 70 miles, improving traffic fluidity. It's always great to see railroads investing in upgrades like this to improve their networks, which date back as far as the 19th century. This stack train will be keeping to the left at Sandpoint Junction just a mile ahead to stay on the Kootenai River subdivision heading towards Whitefish. We'll see them again later today. Moving about a half-mile east to the Sandpoint Amtrak station takes us to Sandpoint Junction, where the Montana rail link diverges off of the Northern Transcon. This loaded crude oil train is coming off of the MRL, which was formally absorbed into BNSF in 2024 following their buyout of the regional network, which had leased the former Northern Pacific tracks since the 1980s. The train station here at Sandpoint is the oldest active former Northern Pacific passenger depot, still serving Amtrak's Empire Builder train daily. From here on out, for the rest of the video, we will be following former Great Northern trackage to Whitefish. Of course, it's all BNSF now. Heading out of Sandpoint, we make it only about 8 miles onto the Kootenai River sub before our first catch at Colburn, which was an eastbound empty grain train. East of Sandpoint, the Kootenai River sub gets a lot more remote quickly, cutting through miles of pine forest that requires some backroad driving, making it incredibly scenic. The reason the grain train had the flashing yellow advanced approach signal at Colburn was track work on the line ahead of them. They stopped behind the stack train that we saw earlier at Sandpoint, who was also waiting for the maintenance to clear up. We got ahead of both trains east of Naples, grabbing some more shots of them heading through the Idaho forest. With the grain train following close behind, as soon as the stack train cleared, we scouted out a location 2 miles further east where the line flies over Deep Creek and then into a tunnel. It was a perfect spot to get the train flying through the forest. Between Deep Creek and Naples, Union Pacific's Spokane subdivision to Eastport, Idaho, and a connection to the CPKC Railway runs parallel to the Kootenai River subdivision. After getting the grain train at Deep Creek, we heard a horn on the UP line, which meant a quick U-turn back to Naples, where 3 CPGEs were wide open hauling a mixed freight train south from the Canadian border. The Spokane sub is not terribly busy, so to get a train coming down from the border with CP power was a great bonus for the day. After our catch on the UP, it was time to leave Idaho behind as we moved into Montana, our third and final state of the day. We made it to Kootenai Falls before our next train arrived, this time a westbound grain train. The subdivision's namesake, the Kootenai River, is behind the trees to the left of the track at this scenic location. We followed the tracks and the banks of the Kootenai River as far as Jennings, Montana, where the tracks curve east to leave the Kootenai behind. From here east, it was small forest roads and no cell service for the rest of the day. The thick forest brush and poor roads made seeing and chasing trains somewhat difficult, as we barely caught up to a manifest train near Fisher River. Continuing along backwoods forest roads, the Montana wilderness could not have been more beautiful. We stopped to get some photos of a bald eagle perched atop a tall pine tree before getting back to the tracks at Wolf Prairie for an approaching train. The train was westbound crude oil loads, thundering at a pretty good speed through the Montana forest. With no other traffic in the picture, we kept enjoying the drive through the wilderness towards Whitefish. We unfortunately were not able to get a train at the Flathead Tunnel, as none were close by while we were there, so we pushed on towards Whitefish with incentive to return one day for that shot. We arrived at the Whitefish Amtrak station after a great dinner in town to find the intermodal train we had been following all day departing after a crew change. Whitefish marks the division point between the Kootenai River subdivision to the west and the Highline subdivision to the east, which climbs over the famous Marias Pass. The 5 motors on this stack train will have their work cut out for them moving up that grade, and we will go further in depth into that stretch of track in the following video, so stay tuned for that coming soon. While train number 7, led tonight by Amtrak engine number 7, sits in the station being serviced, BNSF number 7767 East, the empty grain train we've seen a few times today, pulls in for a crew change. With great efficiency, the empty grain train swaps out crews and is on its way in just a couple of minutes, with Amtrak number 7 departing almost simultaneously in the opposite direction. Number 7 pulls up to the signal at the west end of Whitefish to wait for the grain train to clear up the single main, and once it does, gets on its way. The grain train appears to pull to the east end of Whitefish and stop again, for reasons I am not sure. Regardless, this ends our day trackside along the BNSF Northern Transcon. Stay tuned for more content from this route very soon. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy.